Hello, everyone. It's Frances Widdowson here. Welcome to my podcast. Today, I have with me two incredible people who have been battling it out on the trans activism file. I have with me Barry Neufeld, who was a school trustee, recently fined $750,000 for stating facts, and then Kathy Drake, who is being sued for a tweet that she made on social media about a trans activist. So we can see where all of this is going, which is all sorts of legal ensnarements to silence people and prevent them from saying what they believe to be true. And for people who are unaware of my story, I know people might be aware of me more for the unmarked graves and indigenization types of struggles that I've been involved with. But the other thing that they may not know is my wrongful termination from Mount Royal University began because of my attempts to enter into the trans activism discussion. And what happened, just very briefly, I'll just so people have a bit of background. I invited Megan Murphy to come to Mount Royal University in March of 2019 to engage in a discussion with Julie Ray Goldstein on the question, does trans activism negatively impact women's rights? And although the event was excellent, it was the first time in Canada where these different views on the trans issue had been discussed. It resulted in a lot of hostility amongst my trans activist colleagues, and they started to poison my work environment. And then eventually a harassment complaint was filed where I was found to have violated 3 policies and 2 laws for one tweet that satirized misgendering fatigue, the idea of misgendering fatigue. And as a result of that finding of harassment, it was progressive discipline until December 2021 when I was fired. And then when it was being discussed as to whether I was going to get reinstated, the arbitrator, David Philip Jones, said that I could not be reinstated. Although I was wrongfully terminated, I could not be reinstated because of friction that existed between me and some colleagues, and the fact that some colleagues were reluctant to see me return to Mount Royal. And one of those colleagues was Mary Mulholland, who said that one of the causes of friction was that I had argued that there were only 2 sexes. And because I argued that there were only 2 sexes, this amounted to saying that trans people don't exist, and was a denial of their humanity, or perhaps in the language that we're hearing now, their existential reality. So that's my story, and I've taken a keen interest in the trans activism discussions ever since. And so I'm really excited to have both Barry and Kathy Drake on the programs to tell us about their stories, and then we can have a larger discussion as to what is happening with respect to the trans file. So Barry, I'll start with Barry. Barry, perhaps you might want to introduce yourself and then give people some, background on what the kind of battles that you've been involved with respect to the trans area.
Well, I'm Barry Neufeld. For most of my career, I was a youth probation officer. I worked with special at-risk kids, and kids who are in trouble with the law, about 85% of them are foster children. So they come from a background of trauma and abuse. So I was very familiar with all the troubles they were into, and I had kids who drugged themselves, who gorged and purged, who cut themselves, and all kinds of troubles that they had. And it was because of I also had a profoundly deaf stepdaughter that I helped to set up a special school for when I was in Burnaby. So anyways, because of my heart for troubled kids. I was elected to the school board first in 1993. Got the backing of all the unions, and every year they put me on their recommended list, and the union, regional union, would always contribute to my campaign. I took retirement from the provincial government and went back to university to get my master's degree in 2008. So I took a 3 year break from the school board, but um, towards the end of just before I graduated, the administration and teachers were saying, "Barry, we need you back on the school board. We need your wisdom, advice, or whatever." So I ran again in 2011, and things were going along quite well until 2017. And that's when I first heard about Soji 123, which had already been implemented, and I knew absolutely nothing about it. It was implemented by stealth. The Minister of Education notified all the superintendents in the province that they were doing this as a pilot program. Don't tell the public about it because they may get upset. But when I heard about it, it was August 29th, 2017, and they were going to roll it out from K to 12 in 3 weeks. I thought about it for a couple of months, did a bit of research, and on October the 23rd, 2017, I made a public statement on Facebook that transitioning children was child abuse. Well, the media went nuts, and I was blissfully aware of all this stuff that was going on in the trans community. Megan Murphy had been battling it since 2012. And I remember in 2016, my son Jonathan said that he was following this psychologist from Toronto and a guy by the name of Dr. Jordan Peterson, and he was even supporting him on Patreon. I said, "Well, what's so great about Jordan Peterson?" "Well, he's against all this compelled speech." I said, "What compelled speech?" And he said, "Well, Canadian government now has made it a law that you have to address a person by their preferred pronouns, or that's an act of hate." And I said, "What do you mean, their preferred pronouns?" "Well, a person might look like a guy, but if he identifies as a woman, you got to use she, her." I thought, what a weird idea. That'll never be an issue in Chilliwack. Little did I know. So I was pilloried in the media, and the union president said I wasn't fit to be around children. Well, after spending a whole career working with troubled kids, that was a insult too far, and I sued him for defamation. But he had more money than me, and he fought me all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, and I lost. The judges of the Supreme Court said that he was entitled to insult me because he was protecting a very vulnerable group of kids. When I retired in 2008, I'd never heard of a kid who was unhappy in their body. I knew all the other psychological problems, but the one thing that was interesting, as I said, most of the children were foster kids, and it was the ministry policy that foster parents were not allowed to let any foster children use the internet. They were concerned about online predators. But in 2008 was the year that the iPhone came out, and within a few months, nearly every kid in British Columbia and around the world had a smartphone, and they were able to access porn and um, trans websites on Reddit, Tumblr, and it took off like a social contagion. And this all happened after I retired from the ministry. So um, at, at the same time, the support workers union sued me for creating a toxic work environment, and they wanted $50,000. A couple of months later, in 2018, the Chilliwack school teachers also laid a complaint that I was creating a toxic work environment, and they wanted $50,000. It dragged on and on and on. The BC Human Rights Tribunal is absolutely swamped with complaints, since human resources departments are now using diversity, inclusion, and equity, and they're getting all these complaints. So it was dragging on at a snail's pace. And after about 4 years, the teachers realized, well, Barry Neufeld's a trustee. He doesn't go into classrooms and tell teachers what to do. So it's pretty hard to prove that he's creating a toxic work environment. So we're just going to amend our complaint that he's guilty of hate speech, and that's upsetting our members. And so they were allowed to amend their complaint. And we went through 3 weeks of hearings, wrapped up May the 21st of last year. And the tribunal sat on it for several months until they released their decision. Now, there's two things that I think they were waiting for. Um, they were waiting for the federal government to um, push through Bill C-5, which is the hate speech law. And they figured if they could convict me of hate speech, then they might trundle me off to jail. And the other thing that I think spurred them into action was that horrific mass murder in Tumbler Ridge by a trans-identified student. And they thought, the tide's starting to turn against us. We better strike while the iron is hot. And on May the 21st, that I knew that the teachers were asking for $750,000. But I was surprised that the tribunal actually went along with it. And it's turned out to be a blessing in disguise because if they had only fined me, it's weird. In 2024, they wanted 50,000. 2 years later, they wanted 750,000. I don't know what I did
Inflation.
in the meantime. But anyways, it's been a blessing in disguise because it's woken up the whole world.
Mm,
I am getting support, emotional and financial support from all over the world. And it's a crazy ruling, and I'm making an application for judicial review, and that'll probably take another 2 years before that happens. But anyways, we're plugging along, and hopefully we'll overturn this draconian um, decision. There's already some collateral damage. Um, a trustee on the Chilliwack School Board, Laurie Thronis, who I believe sympathizes with my position. Um, he was afraid that he would be the next one to be sued, so he just resigned this week,
mm,
leaving a vacancy on the Chilliwack School Board.
mm.
Um, there's an election coming up in a few months, so there won't be a by-election, and but he threw in the towel,
Mm.
and I'm concerned that other trustees who have similar views to mine will also probably either resign or not run for reelection. So the trans radicals are taking over our public education system. And you have to believe there's more than two genders or you're not fit to run for office.
And John Cleese. Don't forget about John Cleese. John Cleese has decided not to come to British Columbia because if he says a joke that is, questions whether there's two sexes or more than two, the idea that there's more than two sexes, um,
You know,
in trouble.
when a comedian avoids a community, it's significant because everybody's going to start paying. It's going to hit them in the pocketbook. Businesses are not going to locate in British Columbia because if you say something wrong, you could get sued an extraordinary amount.
Yeah,
They can't pick an ideal workforce because they have to use diversion, inclusion, and equity and have a certain percentage of various minority groups.
yeah,
Um, they won't want to buy land and build a factory because some native band might come along and seize it from them. And they can't attract any employees from other provinces because if the employees have any kids, they don't want to come to BC and put their kids into our toxic public school system. So it's going to sink BC financially.
yes, yep. Okay, Barry. So I think we have a sense of the terrible trials and tribulations that you've gone through. Kathy, why don't you give us a bit of an overview of your situation? What's happened to you?
Well, first of all, thank you, Barry, for everything you're doing and the courage and perseverance that you exhibit. It's incredible, and you're an inspiration to me. In my case, I've been following your cases for a long time. I've talked to Emily uh, Duggan
Good
and
friend.
other. Yeah, she's awesome. And yeah, so thank you for doing what you're doing because you're helping me stay strong too. I'm being sued in the Court of King's Bench. It's a civil case. So that's one thing going for me because it's not a kangaroo court, right? I actually get to face my accuser, that sort of thing. Um, and my lawyer, I have to pay for myself. I'm not being supported pro bono by any organization or any lawyer. It's quite expensive, as Barry Neufeld knows,
Yeah.
and that can be stressful. But I think it's worth the fight because I feel like we're fighting for reality itself, the ability to say 2 + 2 = 4. And in my case, there was a woman who goes by they them pronouns. She's an activist. She was in the school, in the university, which the university, just a quick side quest, the university has become completely captured. In first year courses, they were teaching that sex and gender are different, and they had a final exam question, an entire page dedicated to gender ideology and indoctrinating students. It said, explain how sex is different from gender. It didn't say discuss what you think about this or if you agree or disagree. So indoctrination is happening in this university. The entire university is captured, and there's this one student who is winning awards for her work, where she created a organization called Sea Change Collective, where she was raising money to get students to um, change their name for their uh, diploma or degree. So she was raising money so people could legally change their name. So she's getting all these awards, and she's on her high horse, and she's in the Wickham House, which is run by the Student Association, and she has a table set up during a craft fair. So everybody else is selling crafts. It's before Christmas. It's in November. You can buy stocking stuffers and cute things that people make. And she's there with a table with a handwritten sign that says transaction. So I walk over to her and I said, what's your table about? And she said, well, I'm raising money to fight bills 26, 27, and 29. Essentially, like I'm here to fight the anti-trans bills. I can't remember what she said exactly, but it was to do with Danielle Smith's bills 26, 27, and 29. And I said, do you believe that teachers should be able to keep secrets from parents with minors, such as name changes and pronoun changes? Because that's what Bill 27 is all about stopping. And she said, yes. And so I walked away and I took a picture and I posted it on X, and I was quite rude about it. I was done being polite. Um, whether that was a mistake or not. It got people's attention. I was trying to get people's attention. I felt a duty to report. I felt distressed about this. And I called her a groomer. And I said she shouldn't be anywhere near children.
Yeah.
So that's the hot water that I am in currently. And I feel like it's important to fight. A lot of people have said, hey, just find a way to get out of this or whatever, or but I don't want to do that. So I'm gonna fight.
So just to
Good for
ask you a
you.
question, yeah, good, excellent. This is great. We have to fight. I think this is a big part of the problem is that people get intimidated or they just get tired and therefore they just give in. And that of course emboldens the bullies to continue going after other people and destroying our society and lives of children and so on. But Kathy, just in terms of the groomer, when you were calling this person a groomer, perhaps you can just explain what you meant by that. What did you mean when you called her a groomer?
Well, so if you are keeping secrets from parents with minors, if you're promoting that in any way, that's promoting grooming
Mhm.
because you can't isolate. This is basic. Like I was a camp counselor, I was a beaver leader, scout leader. I was trained in how to um, ensure that there's child safeguarding. And one of the things that, in this world of uh, social work and extended sort of looking after kids, everybody has to be vigilant and consider everyone a potential predator. So you have to take child safeguarding very seriously. And so if you're keeping secrets with parents, that should be considered an incredibly big red flag that something is wrong.
Mm.
You know, I some of these people, they mean. I think they mean well. They think they're helping these kids, and they get really upset when they're called groomers because they have no intention of molesting the child. But what they're doing is blurring the boundaries for that kid, letting them know it's okay to keep secrets from parents, and they're setting these kids up to be manipulated by minor attracted persons. And the minor attracted persons just love this new educational thing because it's opening doors for them to get close to kids and manipulate them. So
Uh,
Right.
they don't like to be called groomers, but that is exactly what they are doing, and they think they're protecting kids from transphobic parents who might give them a bad time. Um,
Yeah, right. And but one thing is that I made it very clear that I was separating between pedophile groomers and
mhm,
trans groomers, and I'm arguing that telling children they can be born in the wrong body is actually grooming children into a cult.
mhm,
mm, yeah.
So there's
yeah.
that stream of grooming as well. It's like the Hansel and Gretel story. You take the kids down the beautiful garden trail through the forest. There's flowers and birds singing. You get them to the candy house full of all sorts of colorful flags and beautiful rainbows. And then you fatten them up and celebrate. And then all of a sudden they're at the oven and they're being convinced that, they have a different name and a different gender. And then if you go social transition and you confuse them, then they're on the track to then start medically transitioning and with puberty blockers, breast binders, which can have irreversible consequences, and then on to uh, uh, cross-sex hormones, and then on
Mhm.
to horrible, horrendous surgeries. So you're grooming them into a cult of the worst medical malpractice scandal in human history. That's very serious. And then,
Amen,
of course,
amen.
yes.
uh, so, in your view, just so I have this correct, grooming is just making children more open than they otherwise would be to this very, very destructive kind of medical treatment. Is that how
Not
you would put
just
it?
not just children. So I would expand it to society at large. I feel like society at large got
Mm,
groomed
yeah.
to accept things like drag time story hour.
Mm,
It's a like a frog in a boiling pot.
mhm,
And now they have drag shows for kids. I don't know if kids are performing drag for adults. It's not just drag time story hour. So it continually ratchets up. It's like, okay, so we're going to start here. First, we're going to put Caitlyn Jenner on the front of a news cover. Then we're going to have this media like I Am Jazz. Then we're going to put these books out and we're going to groom society at large. And then the groomed can become the groomers as
mm,
well
Yeah.
and not
yeah.
even realize it. I think a lot of people, like Barry's right, a lot of groomers or people who are promoting grooming, which I would also call groomers, they don't realize that they've been groomed and they don't even realize that they are grooming. And so
Mm.
this would be, for me, confusing children, priming them, grooming them to begin to believe that they could possibly be born in the wrong body.
Yep.
Any sort of exposure to gender ideology whatsoever, I consider grooming.
Mm.
When
Okay.
I first heard about Soji and they were teaching kids that gender was fluid and they could change from a boy into a girl and maybe they're halfway in between or whatever. My experience as a probation officer, I'd worked with a lot of child molesters and sex offenders. And when I worked with them, the judge would order me to write an assessment. I always had to get a victim impact statement. And one of the most common things they used to break down a child's resistance was to make them question their sexuality. Are you sure you're really a little boy? Maybe you're actually a girl. Why don't we check and find out? Would you like to see my privates? and and I thought, what on earth? School teachers are starting to do the same thing that my criminals used to do. The
Mm.
other thing that was really bothered me when I was supervising sex offenders was how everybody claims, oh, great moral indignation against these sex offenders. They're such a horrible person. They should be, hung from the highest tree. But when they actually knew someone or it was in their family, they would stick up for them. And the worst ones were the wives of these sex offenders.
Mm.
Um, they would stick by their husband no matter what horrible thing that he did, because he had groomed them into thinking what he was doing was normal, and that really makes my enemies irate when I compare school teachers teaching Soji to sex offenders, but there's definitely a parallel there. And
Mm.
that was the biggest red flag that warned me when I first heard about it. It wasn't. I've since thought through my religious and theological objections to this movement, but my first red flag was my professional experience with at-risk kids and victims of sexual abuse.
So, in terms of the children that are being encouraged to see themselves as the opposite sex, is um, is there a high percentage of children who are in care and in these kinds of vulnerable situations? Do we have data on that? That it's more likely for them to adopt this because of their existing vulnerability?
Yes, there is. Now, Chris, Billboard Chris, gave a speech yesterday in Vancouver, and Dr. Wallace Wong, who used to be the guru at BC Children's Hospital, back in 2012, I think he had 4 clients, but he had his caseload had risen to over 1,000 of gender dysphoric kids. Fully half of them were children in care of the state. In other words, they didn't have a mom or a dad to object to this nonsense. Um, Social workers who are employed by the state have to go along with this ideology. And more than half of those foster children were Aboriginal foster children,
Mm.
uh, which they were greatly overrepresented. And these kids are being railroaded into a system that's going to socially transition them, um, poison them with puberty blockers, hormones, and eventually the surgery that mutilates them and ruins them for the rest of their life. One of the Wallace Wong would say, if a child wants to transition and their parents object, all you have to do is threaten suicide, and that'll get your parents to go along with it. He actually admitted that in a publicly recorded broadcast in Vancouver Public Library. But Dr. Ken Zucker points out that these kids don't actually commit suicide, they just threaten it.
Mm.
Once a young person has completely transitioned with all the hormones and puberty blockers and surgery, they are 9 times more likely to commit suicide. This is a death cult.
Mm. Yeah.
And a lot of my gay and lesbian friends are saying they it's the ultimate homophobia because they're transing away the gay.
Yeah.
At least gay and lesbian kids have got all their parts, and if they change their mind and want to go back to heterosexual and have a family, they can still do that. But once a child is fully transitioned, their body's ruined. That's the end of the line. No
Yeah.
more, no more heirs, no more
Yeah.
family.
So I've got a controversial question that I'm going to ask. Uh, is trans a mental illness?
Definitely a mental illness.
What do you think, Kathy? What's your position on this?
Absolutely. It needs to be repathologized. I believe GenSpec with Mia Hughes is working on getting it repathologized.
Yeah.
And when they said it's not a mental illness, they stigmatized mental illness. People need help if they have a mental illness.
Yeah.
And so it's not compassionate. It's actually cruel what we're doing to people that are suffering in this way by affirming them and not just saying, no, this is a mental illness and we can solve this. It'd be like affirming anorexia and being like, yep, you're fat, you shouldn't be eating anything. And
Yeah.
with the death cult, in their own words, they say death before detransition.
Yeah. What is her name or his name?
Yeah.
Victoria Bushels has that tattooed on his thigh. Death before detransition. Um, it's interesting because I remember Megan Murphy when Megan Murphy came to Mount Royal University in 2019, and we were sitting having lunch together, and we both had a discussion about how trans was a mental illness, and we both agreed that it was. But at the time in 2019, there is no way I would have ever have said that publicly because I knew that would get me into serious hot water in the universities because it would have got me some kind of complaint and I would be hauled before some struggle session, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm wondering about both of your views about the universities, the role that the universities have played, because that's one of my major interests. How significant has what's been happening in the universities been to the acceptance of, you know, gender ideology or the idea that trans is not a mental illness and is some kind of real thing? Do you see the universities playing a role in
Oh,
this?
a tremendously influencing role. This idea has been percolating in the university gender studies and women's studies programs. When I first heard about SOGI 123, it had been designed. The lead was the organization called the Art Foundation, and they had at least half a dozen activists from the UBC Ministry of Education, the
Mm,
Art Foundation. They had no representative from the medical community, the psychiatric community, or parents. They only had one employee from the public education system. That was Matt Carruthers, a elementary principal in Delta. And they were the ones that put this program together. It was the brainchild of university activists.
yeah.
Yeah, isn't
And,
it interesting that there was no debate?
Mm, yeah.
Like,
No debate.
um,
I'm just trying to think of my own trajectory in this whole thing because I've been in the university system, of course, for 40 years, and you never. I first heard about the trans thing in about 2003, I guess, and we had a bunch of a panel kind of thing coming, and we got these readings, and we were all invited to attend, and I remember talking to one of my gay friends about this, and he said that people assume that trans and gay were aligned, but he didn't see it that way, and that he thought that it was completely different because gay was about saying who you really were, like coming out and declaring your actual characteristics, admitting them and so on, being open about it. Whereas trans was about denying your actual characteristics, which is your sex, denying your sex. And I remember him saying that he didn't want to take it on right now because he was a grad student and he was going to wait till he got tenure, and then he was going to, he might start talking about that. And of course he never did, because this is kind of one of the problems is if you sort of start silencing yourself at some point, it just becomes a habit, and you're not really able to talk honestly if you start thinking strategically about things, because there really is not, in terms of your professional life, it's not really an upside to getting into these highly contentious issues. But I think that the cowardice, the absolute cowardice, and what is it, mendacity, that's what my friend Jeff Horseman said, that's the two things that are resulting in the equity, diversity, inclusion stuff getting accepted, is cowardice and mendacity. And I think that applies majorly in the university system.
Getting back to, I believe that gender dysphoria is a mental illness. And Frances, I'm going to say something that will probably get me into trouble, but I can't get into much more trouble than I'm already.
Go big or go home.
One of the directives of the decision was for me to stop talking about the negative aspects of gender ideology. But here goes.
Okay.
That horrible situation in Tumbler Ridge. There was a young boy who had serious mental health problems from a very young age. The principal of Tumbler Ridge Secondary was the lead teacher of Soji 123 in the school district 59. So little town of Tumbler Ridge is pushing this gender ideology, and he bought into it, and he decided to transition. So I blame Soji 123 for screwing that boy up. Once he had decided to transition, um, no therapist was willing to deal with any of his other mental health problems because it was eclipsed by the fact that he was now transitioning. So they got overlooked. Um, he was on puberty blockers, which research has shown inflames anger and rage. And for some reason, he still wasn't on hormones, although I think he was late 17 or 18 years old.
Hmm.
And they claim that this program is going to make these trans kids feel more included and welcome in school. Well, it didn't work for him because he dropped out. He wasn't going to school. He just was at home and he was looking at crazy websites and getting all stirred up. And eventually he exploded. And my biggest fear is if the RCMP don't ask the right questions, if they tiptoe around the whole trans issue, they're not going to find out what the real motive was, and it's going to happen again. It's already happened about 7 or 8 times in North America, and we haven't learned from our mistakes yet because this is a serious mental illness, and we got to stop treating it as if it was a human right.
Yeah. And then just to ask you a question about that in terms of why his other mental health problems were ignored, was that because they felt that the transing would sort out all those other mental health problems?
Yes, and the puberty blockers interfere with all the other drugs. I mean, um, most trans people have coexisting mental health problems that they take other medication for. And sometimes, as you know, when you take more than one kind of pill, they interact with each other and they cause unintended side effects. And it's well known that puberty blockers um, cause anger management problems.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of we've now sort of discussed a little bit, I think the mental illness is key, personally, recognizing that, because
Yep.
if it's not recognized as a mental illness, then all sorts of these physical interventions become like the dominant kind of response to it. And really it doesn't address the mental, if it is a mental illness, all the physical things are not going to be effective, because you have to get to the root cause of what is happening. So Kathy, in terms of your examination of this issue, what do you see as our way out of it, or do you see that there's movement in terms of being able to face this more now, or where are we at in terms of
So,
our
I believe
addressing?
Florida is suing WPATH, and we're
Mm,
going to get a lot of documents from that.
Mhm.
There's been more scientific reviews showing that WPATH is bunk. So I think more and more people are going to stop self-censoring themselves, and more academics, I hope. If the universities were the problem, I hope that they could be the solution.
mm,
And your evidence of that there are
mm.
there's at least one.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Well, I think the courage is a big part of, like, once the dam starts to break a little bit, the first people who do speak out, and Barry, I was really happy to uh, hear you mention Megan Murphy, because I think Murphy, since very early on, was taking serious hits on
Yeah.
this subject, and really my own, I really was following her example, and I think now we might see something, but it's going to depend on how the reaction is to this current. And I'm really happy about Barry's case, because I think they probably bit off more than they could chew with that level of fine, and that kind of shocked everyone and got everyone sort of talking about it a little bit. Um, the universities, this is an interesting one. Um, if they are going to be part of the solution, how are they going to be part of the solution? Do you have any sense of that, Kathy?
they're going to have to be restored to academic institutions once more.
Yes, academic space once more. And yeah, so Kathy and I are going to Montreal uh, on Friday to go to the conference, and then there's going to be a march. It's about maintaining female spaces free of men who believe that they're women or claim that they're women. The most significant issue is women in prisons who are subjected to men who claim that they're women. Um, any suggestions for what we should do? Any kind of university type of action that we should take in
I'm
Montreal?
afraid to announce it because I heard that out east
Yeah.
they have some crazy blue-haired Antifas.
Mm.
And I was talking to a woman from Montreal today,
Oh, yeah.
and there's stories of people getting assaulted and being torn right down to the bone with their tendons showing, and the police won't protect you in Montreal. I've heard that they just kind of let you get swarmed. And so it seems as though Casbar is really scared about like I don't think I'm even allowed to live stream. I said I wouldn't live stream without their green light. They're deliberating on whether I'm allowed to live stream because we could accidentally show our location, and they're
Mm.
afraid. So if we did do a university, maybe we could just make it up on the fly, and we could see if any of the women want to come with us,
Hmm.
and we can head down there and take public transit or grab a cab or whatever, and we'll
Yep.
see. I
Yep.
guess is McGill in Montreal? Is that
Yes. McGill and Concordia. I would suggest McGill, just because Concordia is known as crazier than McGill. But I was thinking of getting out the street epistemology mats on some of these claims, and just talking to students and see what their views are on the prisons,
You know,
the men in the prisons, these kinds of things.
I went to a Dallas Brody rally yesterday,
Mm,
and there were protesters there, but I thought, well, there's not very many of them. There's only
mm,
about 20 or 30. They made a lot of noise, but they didn't look very threatening. And then we discovered Uh, why? Obviously, most of these protesters are paid by somebody,
Mm,
and they wanted to have a big protest in front of some embassies downtown to protest the bombing of Iran.
okay.
These crazy nuts, they stick up for Muslim extremist governments, which
Mm,
makes no sense because the Muslims like to hang um, gay and trans people from cranes. In Iran, the punishment for being gay was to transition the man and turn him into a
So I
woman.
heard. Yeah.
Um, but so maybe if they're still worked up about Iran when you get back to Montreal, the they'll lose their steam for going after a couple of radicals from Alberta.
Yeah, well, Wintermute, that was the last one I saw in Montreal. So Robert Wintermute, who the Joji Carti principles, that he was a gay man and he thought trans was very similar to gay, and wrote the materials about the trans stuff. And then he came to realize that no one had considered women in developing these principles, and came out against it and said that the LGB should be separated from the T. That was his position, because
Yes.
uh, they were two separate kinds of movements and were not compatible. Anyway, when he went to speak on this at McGill, an angry mob of trans activists, surrounded the room he was supposed to be going into, and wouldn't allow the event to take place. So that was the last kind of meltdown that McGill experienced on the trans activism. But I think it's a worthwhile thing to just to go and test it out. Don't announce it, like, because if you announce it, then it gives people time to mobilize and make life difficult for you and so on. But
Yeah.
I think the universities, if you can get in there and have some questions that you're asking the students, it kind of, to some extent, invigorates the ethos of the academic character of these places.
Yeah.
Do you think that's worthwhile, Barry? What's your thoughts on going into these universities and
Uh,
asking some critical questions?
Francis, you're following in the footsteps of Charlie Kirk, but I hope you don't end up with the same results.
I don't know. I don't. My experience has not been. It's not really threatening.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I'm a woman. I think that men, my how the men are treated, it seems to me, are treated very differently than women,
Yes.
and I saw that in Winnipeg in a big way, because
Hmm.
the men get targeted and they get assaulted and so on, whereas I get pushed around a little bit, but nothing very serious has happened. But things seem to be escalating a little bit, so I guess we'll see. Um, other thoughts on how we can move the needle in a more rational direction? Kathy, do you have any thoughts on that besides the
Um,
university scene?
right, the spectrum street epistemology. We have to stop self-censoring.
Mm, yeah,
So that's kind of what got us into this mess. So even if you're at a pub and you're sitting at the bar, don't be afraid to, have a conversation. If something is able to come up, like throw in a joke about how, we don't even know what a woman is anymore or something, find a way to break the ice. And one server at the pub, she's a young pink-haired girl, and I showed her the gang symbol for the turfs, which are two X's. See, two X's, XX. She thought that was quite funny,
yeah.
Yeah, two X's. The, we've got two X chromosomes. So she thought that was funny, and she's young, entered the workforce, so just finding ways to, I think, maybe getting better messaging too, like puberty is a human right,
Yes.
Yeah,
clear and simple.
Yes.
yeah. And no one is born in the wrong body. That
No.
ridiculous statement. I don't know when that took hold, in popular consciousness, but you obviously cannot be born in the wrong body.
You know,
Your body is your body. Now you might not like your body, you might, but it's not the wrong body because it's your body. Like that makes no sense. These kinds of things. I remember when I was in at Mount Royal, and it was the people would say trans women are women. It would be like then that would be that's it. That's no, what do you mean? Like what it, could you just please explain what that means? Trans women are women. I don't even know if anyone explained it. So asking questions. You don't even have to argue with people. You can just ask them a question. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean that trans women are women? I don't understand. I don't understand that thing. So Barry, what's the future for you now? What's the next steps?
well, I just walk over the horizon into the sunset. Um, we'll get our application for judicial review in, and being the Supreme Court is quite backed up, it might take them 2 years to hear my case.
Mm,
My fundraising people have told me, insisted very firmly that I must not die.
mhm.
I'm 78 years old now. I'm
Yeah.
getting kind of long in the tooth, but I'm going to keep fighting this until the end, and I start pushing up daisies. And I really don't care about the slings and arrows of my enemies.
Mhm.
My only concern is that when I show up at the pearly gates, that St. Peter will let me in.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that myself. But one thing I wanted to congratulate you on in terms of and this is the thing to keep in mind about the legal struggles, and Kathy as well, is often you don't get people to actually state what their case is until you go into the legal arena. And so it's very helpful to get all these arguments on paper so that we're clear what exactly are their arguments about these matters. And so
Hmm.
that's something because it often seems really difficult, the legal, because of the time and all the things that happen. But at least you just you get that decision, you get legal minds that are grappling with issues, they have to write them down, and then you can now have something to analyze as opposed to a lot of kind of insults and things like that, which tend to happen in the political realm, and people just avoiding the issue, which I notice happens a lot in British Columbia in the legislature. No one really says anything; they just insult people like Dallas Brody.
Yeah.
Um, so, Kathy, what's
They don't engage in discussion. They just
oh,
do name calling,
yes,
which
and
is not helpful.
and in the courts you can't do that. You have to make an argument in the courts. You can't just make
Yeah.
call someone names. And so, Kathy, what's happening on the horizon for you?
I'm being cross-examined in early May, by the opposition lawyer for an afternoon.
Mm,
And I think being present for your arbitration virtually and seeing all of that activity
mm,
was good preparation
mm-hmm.
and training that helped me learn a lot about all of these sorts of things, seeing it in action. And yeah, I don't really know. I'm kind of learning as I go along.
Mm,
It seems like it's going to be a long road,
yeah,
very long road. Yeah.
yeah. And so, do you have a date for that?
Not a set date, early
Okay.
May, between the 8th and the 16th or something like that.
Okay. And is
Hmm.
it going to be in person?
No, it's going to be virtually.
Okay. And is it public?
No, I don't believe
No.
so.
Okay.
Although I
That's a
believe
pity.
the transcript is going to become a court document, and I think all court documents become public.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's a pity you can't get the public to be watching, just like I got with the arbitration, the appeal, that people get to watch it and you can get some, you know, checks and balances by people watching it. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're coming up to the hour. So I'm wondering if you guys have any final thoughts that you would like to share with the audience about your struggle or where we're heading as a society or anything like that?
Barry, do you want to go first?
Well, fundraising for me has gone well. I'm using a Made in Chilliwack fundraising society, the Rights and Freedoms Fundraising Society. Google that and you'll find more information about me there. And I just want to thank you, Frances, for giving me this opportunity to tell my story. And it was great meeting you, Kathy. Uh, Seeing you're going through a similar struggle as me. And I wish you every success. And I think you need to insist that they allow the public to watch in on your trial. During my tribunal thing, they would allow people to phone in so they could hear what was going on, but they couldn't see it. And quite often, it's the body language is important as well as what's said. But I'm sure you'll do well. You got a good case, and I wish you all the luck in the world.
And Kathy, what final words for our audience?
Thank you, Barry. It's wonderful to meet you too. It's like getting to meet one of my heroes. So it's a real treat. And I'm really lucky that I have Angelica from Rebel News, who's
Hmm.
following my case and going along. So hopefully she'll be able to have access to the courthouse, and hopefully it's public when it does go officially to trial.
Yeah,
Um, and I wanted to say, though, that one concept that we haven't touched upon yet with all of this is DARVO, the concept of the cry bully, right?
Mm,
So they deny, attack, and then they reverse victim and offender. So when you say,
yeah,
hey, like there's something, as soon as you take away their entitlement, as far as having access to children's minds, to groom them, whatever, and when I say that, giving children access to gender ideology is grooming, I truly believe that because they're not allowed to question it. It's
hmm,
indoctrinated, it's not being presented in an anthropological sense. In
no,
that this is what some people believe, but it could be nonsense. The way that you would teach, religion in an anthropological way, it's being taught in an immersive way, the way that a cult would teach it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so when you call them out on that, when you threaten anyone's entitlements, they can invoke Darvo and deny that they're doing this, and then they attack you, and then they say that you are the offender. They become the
yeah,
victim.
yeah,
And so anyone who's going through this, I know there's also a lot of people that have cases that aren't able to go public. That's not part of their strategy. There's so many cases. And so Darvo is a good thing to be aware of. These are cry bullies. And as Graham Linehan said, he called them paper tigers.
Mm,
So I think we have to fight till the end.
yes.
yeah,
Yeah. And I think that these conversations, although, might not seem very impactful in the short term, in the long term strategy, it is about building alliances and making people feel that it's okay to speak out and question what Mia Hughes calls is the worst medical scandal in human history.
it
And
certainly
we
is.
are, a few of the people who, when this is all done, can say we stood up, unlike many of the people who were too afraid to actually take this on. So I really
Hmm.
wanted to thank both you, Barry, and Kathy for joining me today. And hopefully, we'll be able to see the end of this scandal in the near future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thanks, Barry.
you.
Have a good evening.